Friends, thank you for being here today. Imagine, if you will, a vast, sweeping expanse of land that challenges our very comprehension of scale and proportion. What if I told you that there is a single Canadian province that holds a staggering 3% of the Earth's entire renewable freshwater supply? Or consider this paradox. What if I told you that 90% of its 8.5 million residents are packed into just one narrow, Main Street strip of land, leaving a territory roughly twice the size of Texas, almost entirely devoid of human habitation? We are speaking, of course, of Quebec, a place that operates not just as a geopolitical entity, but as a linguistic and cultural island in North America, physically 3 times the size of France, and simultaneously serving as a massive green battery powering the neon lights of New York City. The story of Quebec is not merely a tale of borders drawn by colonial powers. It is a profound testament to how bizarre, ancient, and often violent physical geography dictates the destiny of a land and its people. Today, I want to take you on a deep dive into the incredible extreme contrasts of Canada's empty province. We are going to explore the geological marvels, the hydrological superpowers, the historical fortresses, and the agricultural anomalies that make Quebec one of the most geographically fascinating places on our planet. And if you love uncovering the hidden geographic secrets of our world, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss an adventure. But to truly grasp the scale of what we are talking about, we have to rewind the clock. We need to look back not just hundreds or thousands of years, but hundreds of millions of years into deep time. The physical landscape of this province is heavily scarred by cosmic violence and ancient tectonic struggles, creating marvels that are completely unique on the global stage. Picture this. You're looking down at the Earth from the International Space Station. As you cross over eastern Canada, your eyes are immediately drawn to a massive, dark blue bullseye piercing through the green wilderness. This is the Eye of Quebec, officially known as the Manicouagan Reservoir. Located in the remote, rugged Côte-Nord region, this breathtaking annular lake has origins that read straight out of a science fiction novel. Roughly 214 million years ago, during the Triassic period, a time when the first dinosaurs were just beginning to walk the Earth, a massive asteroid, estimated to be about 5 kilometers in diameter, slammed directly into what is now the Canadian Shield. The sheer violence of this impact is almost incomprehensible. It instantly vaporized rock, triggered catastrophic shock waves, and created a crater roughly 100 kilometers wide. But what makes this geography so spectacular is what happened in the millions of years that followed. The deeply compressed center of the crater slowly rebounded, pushing upward to form René-Levasseur Island. To put the scale of this into perspective, this island, sitting dead in the middle of a crater lake, is actually larger in landmass than the entire island of Montreal. Today, human engineering has blended seamlessly with this ancient cataclysm. The reservoir has been dammed to serve as a critical source of hydroelectric power. It is a monument to the sheer violence of Earth's history, now literally harnessed to light up the modern world. Now, if you trace your finger just a bit further south on the map, you will encounter another jaw-dropping testament to deep time: the Laurentian Mountains. Situated just north of Montreal, these rolling, densely forested peaks are among the oldest geological formations on the face of the Earth. They are a prominent part of the Grenville orogeny, a massive mountain-building event that occurred over 1 billion years ago. Think about that for a second. The mighty Rocky Mountains in western North America are essentially geological toddlers in comparison, having formed a mere 80 to 55 million years ago. When the Laurentians were young, geologists believed they were incredibly violent and imposing, likely standing as tall and jagged as the Himalayas are today. However, they have been subjected to over 1 billion years of relentless erosion by wind, water, and most significantly, the grinding weight of continental glaciers during successive ice ages. These forces acted like cosmic sandpaper, wearing the once towering peaks down into the rolling, welcoming mountains we see now. This specific geology created a landscape that is absolutely perfect for human recreation, rather than acting as an impassable barrier. The rounded nature of these ancient mountains makes them one of North America's premier ski destinations, as the slopes are naturally smooth and deeply accessible compared to younger, more treacherous mountain ranges. Standing on those peaceful ski slopes today, you might think this ancient rock is entirely dormant, but you would be wrong. We rarely associate eastern North America with massive tectonic activity, yet beneath the ancient rock of Quebec lies a complex and restless seismic history. Back in 1663, the Charlevoix region of Quebec was the epicenter of a terrifying earthquake, estimated by modern geologists to have been between magnitude 7.3 and 7.9. The Charlevoix seismic zone remains the most active earthquake zone in eastern Canada. The underlying cause? Another ancient cosmic impact. A 450-million-year-old meteorite strike fractured the Earth's crust in this region, creating a permanent geological weakness that occasionally and violently slips. The historical accounts from French Jesuit missionaries living in the area during that 1663 quake describe an almost apocalyptic scene. The earthquake reportedly caused the massive St. Lawrence River to run white with sulfur, churning up sediment for weeks. Landslides were so severe that they permanently altered the flow of rivers and leveled entire ancient forests in a matter of seconds. The shock waves were so powerful that stone chimneys crumbled as far away as the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and church bells reportedly rang on their own throughout New England. It serves as a haunting reminder that Quebec's geography is not just static scenery. It is a living, breathing entity capable of immense destruction. While fire and rock shaped its foundation, there is one element that truly defines Quebec above all others: water. Make no mistake, Quebec is an absolute hydrological superpower. The province holds approximately 3% of the entire world's renewable freshwater reserves. To visualize this, you have to imagine a vast territory where water is almost as common an element of the landscape as dry land. Quebec contains more than 3 million distinct bodies of water and thousands of winding rivers. It holds roughly 40% of all the fresh water in Canada, a country already globally famous for its aquatic abundance. This massive volume of water is the direct footprint of the last ice age. As the colossal Laurentide ice sheet, which once covered most of North America in ice over a mile thick, finally retreated, it ruthlessly scoured the landscape. It carved deep depressions into the hard bedrock of the Canadian Shield, which subsequently filled with glacial meltwater. This violent process created the millions of pristine lakes scattered across the province today. From the massive St. Lawrence River, which serves as one of the world's great commercial arteries, to the remote, sprawling reservoirs in the frozen north, water is the undeniable lifeblood of Quebec's physical geography. And when we talk about this water, we aren't just talking about serene lakes. We are talking about terrifying raw power. Open almost any geography textbook, and it will tell you that the Bay of Fundy has the world's highest tides. But Quebec's Ungava Bay is a highly legitimate yet wildly overlooked challenger for that global title. Located in the frigid Nunavik region in extreme northern Quebec, Ungava Bay is a massive, incredibly cold inlet separating the province from Baffin Island. Because the bay is funnel-shaped, the incoming tides from the Atlantic Ocean are aggressively squeezed into an increasingly narrower area, forcing the water level to rise dramatically. Measurements taken in the Leaf Basin on the bay's western edge have recorded astronomical tides reaching as high as 16.8 meters. That is over 55 feet of vertical water movement. This statistically rivals, and sometimes exceeds, the extremes found in Fundy. However, because Ungava Bay is so extraordinarily remote, surrounded by treacherous permafrost and locked in dense pack ice for much of the year, it is exceedingly difficult for scientists to measure consistently. As a result, this geographic giant remains a hidden secret, despite possessing some of the most powerful hydrokinetic energy potential anywhere on Earth. By the way, if you have ever visited the Bay of Fundy, or if you've ever witnessed massive tidal shifts like this in person, let me know your story down in the comments. I always love hearing about your geographic adventures. So, what does a province do with all this raw hydrokinetic power? It harnesses it. Quebec's human geography is largely defined by its absolute mastery of this resource. The province generates an astounding 99.8% of its electricity from renewable water sources. Thanks to the rugged, cascading topography of the Canadian Shield and the massive water flow of its northern rivers, Quebec has transformed its government-owned utility, Hydro-Quebec, into a global economic powerhouse. The scale of these hydroelectric projects is difficult to wrap your head around. They involve diverting mighty rivers and flooding areas the size of small European nations. Quebec actually produces so much electricity that its population cannot possibly consume it all. Consequently, it exports vast amounts of this power via massive high-voltage transmission lines stretching across the border into the northeastern United States. In terms of energy geography, Quebec literally acts as a massive green battery for North America, quietly supplying significant percentages of the power used to light up New York City and heat homes throughout New England. Now, with all this land and all this power, you might imagine a population spread far and wide. But the reality is a story of human beings clinging to the very edge of the inhabitable world. It is incredibly difficult to overstate the sheer physical scale of Quebec. Covering over 1.5 million square kilometers, it is the largest province in Canada by area, roughly 3 times the size of France and twice the size of Texas. It is so large that it stretches across 3 distinct climate zones: humid continental in the south, subarctic in the interior, and true Arctic tundra in the far north. Yet, despite this massive size, the brutal realities of physical geography dictate that the overwhelming majority of the province remains completely uninhabited. The Canadian Shield, a rocky plateau characterized by extremely thin, acidic soil and exposed granite, covers about 95% of the province. This unforgiving terrain makes large-scale agriculture totally impossible in the north. forcing the vast majority of human settlement into the St. Lawrence lowlands in the extreme south. What you get is an extreme case of uneven population distribution. Roughly 90% of Quebec's 8.5 million residents live in a narrow, highly concentrated strip of land along the banks of the St. Lawrence River. It creates a fascinating Main Street effect, where almost all major urbanization is strung out in a linear fashion along a single waterway. Furthermore, nearly 50% of the province's entire population resides within the Greater Montreal metropolitan area alone. In essence, Quebec is fundamentally a small, densely populated, European-sized country tightly glued to the bottom of a massive, subcontinental wilderness, and clinging to that edge requires some extraordinary architectural survival skills. Take Montreal, for instance. It is a city that has geographically adapted from the inside out to survive its own brutal climate. To endure the harsh, unrelenting Canadian winters where temperatures can plummet well below 30 degrees Celsius, accompanied by blinding blizzards, the city constructed the Réseau, commonly known as the Underground City. This is not a simple subway system. It is the largest underground pedestrian complex in the world. The network consists of an astonishing 32 kilometers of brightly lit, climate-controlled tunnels connecting 10 different metro stations, bus terminals, train stations, and hundreds of shops, luxury hotels, museums, universities, and office buildings. It is an immense example of human adaptation to hostile physical geography. In theory, a resident of Montreal could commute to work, go grocery shopping, visit the doctor, attend a university lecture, and go to the movies for an entire 6-month winter without ever once stepping foot outside or even owning a winter coat. The Réseau effectively turns Montreal into a dual-layer organism, a vibrant outdoor city in the humid summer and a protected, self-sustaining subterranean metropolis during the freezing winter. But this adaptation isn't just modern. If we look further back into history, we can actually see the scars of human survival carved directly into the earth. One of the most striking visual impacts of historical geography on Quebec is the seigneurial system, originally established by the powerful French Cardinal Richelieu in 1628. This was a feudal land distribution system meticulously designed to give every single tenant farmer direct access to the St. Lawrence River. In the terrifying wilderness of 17th century North America, the river was the only reliable highway for transport and communication. Unlike the British township system implemented elsewhere, which divided land into rigid, isolated square grids, the French system divided land into incredibly long, narrow rectangular strips running perfectly perpendicular to the riverbank. This ingenious layout allowed farmers to live in close proximity to their neighbors along the river road, creating continuous, tight-knit villages rather than lonely, isolated homesteads. If you look at high-resolution satellite imagery of the St. Lawrence Valley today, you can still clearly see this distinct, unmistakable barcode pattern carved into the earth. It is a stunning example of how a 17th century survival decision permanently etched itself into the physical geometry of the modern landscape. But while the seigneurial system organized the farmers along the riverbanks, the sheer, untamed physical geography of the St. Lawrence River continued to dictate the birth of major cities and the bizarre fates of those who dared navigate it. I want you to picture the St. Lawrence not just as a smooth water highway, but as a highway with a massive, unavoidable roadblock. Just south of the island of Montreal lies a treacherous, churning stretch of whitewater known as the Lachine Rapids. Here, the river suddenly drops 42 feet in elevation over a bed of jagged rocks. Keep in mind, every single drop of water from all 5 of the Great Lakes, Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario, must violently squeeze through this specific geographic bottleneck before it can reach the ocean. When French explorer Jacques Cartier first hit this impassable wall of water in 1535, his path was entirely blocked. He was so stubbornly convinced that he was on the very verge of discovering a westward water route to Asia that he sarcastically named these rapids La Chine, the French word for China. Because these massive rapids were completely impassable for deep water ocean vessels, every single ship arriving from Europe was forced to stop. They had to drop anchor, unload their precious cargo, and physically carry it overland before continuing into the interior. That simple geological stop sign in the riverbed is the sole reason Montreal exists where it does today. It forced a permanent transfer point, which inevitably grew into a trading post, then a bustling settlement, and ultimately the economic engine of the entire country. Montreal became the ultimate inland port not by choice, but because the physical geography of the river absolutely demanded it. Now, if we travel from those churning rapids to the complete opposite end of this mighty river system, where the St. Lawrence violently empties into the vast Gulf, we encounter another geographical extreme that is almost too bizarre to believe. Lying right in the mouth of the river is Anticosti Island. To understand its scale, Anticosti is larger than the entire Canadian province of Prince Edward Island and larger than the U.S. state of Delaware. Yet, its total human population hovers at a minuscule 200 people. Why is this massive landmass virtually empty? Because its physical geography is incredibly hostile. The island is essentially a colossal, flat slab of ancient limestone, carved with deep, dramatic canyons and stunning waterfalls. In fact, the island's Boreal Falls plunges 76 meters, making it significantly taller than the mighty Niagara Falls. Yet it sits completely unseen by the outside world, completely surrounded by razor-sharp, shallow reefs and battered by blinding fog and ferocious Atlantic storms. Over the centuries, these treacherous shores have violently shredded the hulls of more than 400 ships, earning the island the terrifying, well-deserved nickname, the Cemetery of the Gulf. But the weirdest chapter in Anticosti's geographical history isn't about shipwrecks. It's about a bizarre biological experiment born from sheer isolation. In 1895, a phenomenally wealthy French chocolate magnate named Henri Meunier decided he wanted the ultimate private playground. He purchased the entire island, all 3,000 square miles of it, for $125,000 to turn it into his personal hunting estate. Because the island was so geographically isolated from the mainland, it lacked many common mainland animal species. So, Meunier imported 220 white-tailed deer. Well, what happens when you introduce a grazing species into a massive, closed geographical loop with absolutely no natural predators? No wolves, no bears, no cougars? The population explodes. Today, there are an estimated 160,000 white-tailed deer roaming Anticosti Island. They outnumber humans by an astonishing 800 to 1. The deer literally rule the landscape. They have fundamentally altered the island's botany, systematically eating all the young balsam fir trees to the point where the very composition of the ancient forests has permanently changed. It is a living, breathing geographical petri dish, a massive island graveyard completely overrun by deer, shaped entirely by its extreme isolation from the rest of the continent. Would you ever visit a remote, shipwreck-surrounded island ruled by 160,000 deer? Let me know in the comments below, because honestly, I'm still trying to decide if it sounds like an amazing adventure or a geographical nightmare. And if you think a deer-infested island graveyard is strange, we only need to cast our gaze to the extreme northern reaches of the province to find geography that genuinely looks extraterrestrial. In the vast frozen tundra of the Nunavik region, a territory roughly the size of California, but with the population of a small town, the land is permanently locked in permafrost. But this frozen ground isn't just flat and lifeless. It is home to massive, spontaneously erupting ice hills known as pingos. Imagine walking across a barren, frozen plain and suddenly encountering a massive, conical hill that looks exactly like a volcano, but is made entirely of earth and solid ice. These pingos form when underground water is trapped beneath the freezing permafrost. As the water freezes, it expands with terrifying force, violently pushing the earth upward into a massive dome that can reach the height of a 10-story building. They are effectively ice volcanoes, growing slowly over centuries, completely dominating the skyline of the Arctic tundra. When the ice core of a pingo eventually melts during climatic shifts, the massive hill collapses in on itself, leaving behind a perfectly cratered lake that looks exactly like an asteroid impact. It is a violent, churning landscape driven entirely by the physics of freezing water, a stark reminder that even the most desolate, empty regions of Quebec are geologically alive and constantly transforming. All of this geography, the rivers, the rapids, the isolated islands, and the harsh winter conditions, eventually set the stage for an epic collision of empires. To understand the soul of Quebec, you have to understand it as a natural fortress born from a geographic choke point. The very name Quebec is a testament to this fact. It is derived from an Algonquin indigenous word meaning where the river narrows. Upstream and downstream from modern-day Quebec City, the mighty St. Lawrence River is vast and expansive. But at this one highly strategic point, the river dramatically pinches, narrowing significantly between the towering cliffs of Cap Diamant and the rocky shoreline of Lévis. The famous French explorer Samuel de Champlain recognized its unparalleled military value, founding Quebec City precisely on this spot in 1608. Champlain knew that because of this dramatic narrowing, he could effectively control all marine traffic moving deep into the interior of the North American continent, simply by placing heavy artillery cannons high atop the cliffs. The physical geography created the perfect, unpassable natural toll booth. Because of its precarious position, Quebec City stands today as a profound anomaly. It is the only city on the continent north of Mexico to retain its original fortified European city walls. These massive stone fortifications, stretching for 4.6 kilometers, are not just a tourist attraction. They are a physical, lingering reminder of the bloody struggle between France and Britain for total control of the continent. While almost all other North American cities tore down their defensive walls during the 19th century to facilitate traffic flow, these ramparts were passionately preserved in the 1870s. Today, the single preservation decision completely defines the city's modern geography. creating a highly distinct upper town and a bustling lower town, earning it a prestigious UNESCO World Heritage status. From that single, heavily fortified geographic anchor, something incredible happened. The Empire of New France began to stretch across the continent. At its absolute peak in the early 1700s, the territory administered directly from Quebec City encompassed a massive crescent shape that stretched all the way from the frozen shores of Hudson Bay, completely surrounding the Great Lakes, and extending down the sprawling Mississippi River basin to the Gulf of Mexico. How did a relatively small population of French settlers control such a massive swath of land? The answer, once again, lies in the waterways. French voyageurs and fur traders brilliantly mastered the canoe routes. They could launch a birch bark canoe in Montreal and paddle continuously all the way down to New Orleans, while the expanding British colonies were effectively boxed in against the Atlantic coast by the Appalachian Mountains. The French utilized the interconnected watersheds to claim the entire interior of the continent. The empire eventually fell, but cities across the American Midwest today, Detroit, Des Moines, St. Louis, Baton Rouge, are all geographic echoes of an era when Quebec City was the capital of half a continent. Fast forward to today, and the echoes of that empire have left Quebec as a complete cultural anomaly. It remains a linguistic island, the only jurisdiction in North America, with a francophone, French-speaking majority, operating solely in French. This cultural reality is actively engineered and fiercely protected by stringent laws, most notably Bill 101, the Charter of the French Language. What makes this law so geographically fascinating is that it literally physically changes the look of the land. Drive across the provincial border from neighboring Ontario or upstate New York, and the visual geography of signage changes instantly and dramatically. By law, all commercial signs and public notices must be predominantly in French. This bold legislative move preserves the linguistic demographic against the crushing pressure of over 350 million surrounding English speakers. It is a truly brilliant modern example of how political boundaries can create distinct, protected cultural ecosystems. Now, before we wrap up, I have to share one last geographic quirk. And it happens to be the sweetest, most unexpected geopolitical monopoly on Earth. Quebec is the undisputed heavyweight champion of maple syrup, producing an astonishing 72% of the entire global supply. But do not mistake this for a quaint cottage industry. This is a highly sophisticated, ruthlessly regulated agricultural cartel, officially known as the Federation of Quebec Maple Syrup Producers. They operate with a level of control fundamentally similar to OPEC. They establish strict quotas, manage supply, and carefully dictate the global price. And physical geography is the absolute key to their dominance. Sugar maple trees require a perfect Goldilocks zone to produce sap. Hard, freezing temperatures at night, followed immediately by warm, thawing days during a short spring window. The geographical placement of Quebec's southern forests lies perfectly within this sweet spot. To protect this lucrative asset, they even maintain the Global Strategic Maple Syrup Reserve, a high-security warehouse facility housing millions of pounds of premium syrup used to flood the market during poor harvest years. They ensure that, regardless of the unpredictable weather patterns, your morning pancakes will never be dry. So, what does all of this tell us? When we look at Quebec, we are not just looking at lines on a map. We are looking at a masterclass in how physical geography dictates the human experience. From a devastating ancient asteroid impact that now powers millions of modern homes, to a perfectly situated river bottleneck that decided the military fate of an empire. From the cruel, freezing climate that forced the creation of a subterranean metropolis, to the delicate freeze and thaw cycle that birthed an agricultural cartel. Quebec proves that extreme physical geography, the ice, the ancient rock, the endless water, and the unforgiving climate, doesn't just provide a backdrop for history, it actively writes it. It dictates where we can live, how we build our cities, and how a unique, vibrant culture can survive and thrive against all odds. If this deep dive into Quebec changed the way you look at the map, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling me which of these bizarre geographic facts blew your mind the most. Was it the Underground City, the Eye of Quebec, or the Maple Syrup Cartel? Let's discuss it down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.